The movement of freight in the United States by rail is an awe-inspiring sight. Freight trains miles long snake around the country going from state to state. But for 150 years, one part of the train was vital to the freight movement. One thing that was a godsend to the crews, the caboose. Before the use of continuous vacuumed vehicles, the movement of large freight, or more importantly, stopping the train, had to be tackled. Especially as both loads and trains got larger, it was obvious that just the train's brakes was simply not enough. As both the popularity and the need for longer trains grew, it became clear that the usual braking practices were no longer working. Trains were restricted by length and speed, so a need for a braking vehicle was required. The solution was the brake van. The van had an independent screw-down brake which would be able to be applied in part to assist with braking for goods trains or applied in full in either an emergency, like a coupling snapping, or at the end of the day to act as an anchor to stop the train running away once the engine was uncoupled. In the USA, they were seeing a very similar problem, and the solution was just about the same, just on a much grander scale. The 1830s, the movement of freight in the USA was a long and lonely affair. Freight going from state to state would take days or even weeks. Crews were also faced with cold nights and desolate sidings. At first, the caboose was a place to just hold tools a guard and conductor would need, and a basic chair and table for paperwork to be done. Lamps, chains and flags were also stored there in case conductors needed to use them. In all, effectively at this point, the caboose wasn't too dissimilar from the standard brake van. But the caboose's shape is unique to the others, and this is thanks to the cupola. This tiny vestibule was created quite by accident by a conductor on the Chicago and North Western Railway. Mr. T.B. Watson was left without his normal caboose when it was reassigned, so he used an old boxcar instead. One of the main jobs a guard had to deal with was watch the train for any issues on the go. Usually this was done by leaning out of the window, but the view is very limited. This boxcar, however, had a hole in its roof, and Watson saw an opportunity, not only to see the train in a unique way, but to try something completely new. So when the train set off, and ensuring no one was watching because it would certainly break a few rules, he got on a box and stuck his head out the hole. Not only did he get quite a thrill with his hair blowing in the breeze, but he got an excellent view of the train as well. When he got to his destination, he was so impressed with the view, he decided to tell his superiors. Far from being mad for breaking the rules, they took his proposal to heart and created a raised area with windows, much safer than what Watson did. However, I have to admit, the mental image of Watson sticking his head out of the roof like a dog at a car window was actually quite funny. Taking freight in this time wasn't a simple one-man's job. While the crew handled the engine up front, at the back the conductor was usually joined by two other men, this being the flagman and the brakeman. The conductor handled the paperwork, and the flagman would watch for any defects in the train, while the brakeman would handle the brakes, the switches, and would be in charge of marshalling the train in the station or the yard. When the train stopped at night, did the caboose come into its own? Over time, creature comfort started to creep in. It wasn't long before the caboose became the crew's home away from home. It was cosy, comfortable and warm, ideal for those many days from home. To protect the train, it was the brakeman's job to work with the head brakeman, placing lanterns and fuses along the line, showing other trains that they were there. It's easy to imagine the crew sitting on the beds or at the conductor's desk, around the stove eating dinner prepared at the small kitchenette before retiring for the night in the bunks. Even toilets were installed, although chemical toilets would be added later. Most cabooses in the early days were made of wood. However, over time, steel would take over as the medium of choice. but law dictated that the caboose was mandatory for all freight trains. Even the use of continuous braking systems would not stop the caboose going up and down the country. It was also common for crews to have an assigned caboose. They were accustomed to the needs of the crew and would be switched for other cabooses when the train needed to switch crews. Considering crews would bring their own clothes and belongings, it was easier moving the caboose rather than moving the crew out. As the braking technology improved, brakemen were not required, and both brakemen and then flagmen were then made redundant. In the 1980s, the laws surrounding cabooses were relaxed, and technology took over where the conductor and the caboose left off. A device called an end-on-train device would go on to replace the caboose. The device sends data back to the crew of the train's condition, including monitoring the brake line in case of separation. Some devices can also be connected to a switch in the cab at the head of the train. In an emergency brake application, the toggle switch is used and the pressure in the brakes can be changed at both the front and the back of the train, applying the brakes faster. The only thing the ETD can't do is be a lookout when the trains are backing up. Instead, there is an open platform for the crew to stand on and confirm that the coast is clear. The caboose, however, has not been relegated to the sidings yet, and on the odd occasion they are still used on the network, normally as part of a preserved freight move, and they are the most common in preserved site. They are not normally used as accommodation, but they are as iconic to the trains in the US as Big Boy itself.